useless tool chest, we open our series today with our primary verse. Let's read. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. Psalms 139, verse 14. Understanding the inner milieu, or the inner environment of our physical bodies, will give you greater and much needed awareness of what it takes to keep them healthy and strong. Since water is the second most important element for our body's health, it is critical that we understand it. In this episode, I will touch on 5 water types, even though there are numerous others available. Today's topics include organic versus inorganic water, spring water, distilled water, alkaline water, and carbonated water. Also, please leave a comment below and click the like button if you found this information useful. And please share this information far and wide. The percentage of the population is dehydrated and needs this kind of material to start healing. Thank you. In our last video, Dr. Group explained that natural spring water contains inorganic minerals that turns the body into stone.
You look at a 70-year-old, they're all hunched over. Their body's just turning to stone. As a matter of fact, in the history books, they used to have petrified organ syndrome, where people that lived by rivers and streams and just to drink the water, they had so many inorganic minerals in there, which are just tiny microscopic rocks, right, that they would turn to stone. And it's best to eat fruits first thing in the morning when you wake up, when your body has processed and dumped all that stuff. So what do you have if you eat fruit first thing in the morning? You have fiber, living fiber. You have living structured water, distilled water in the fruit. You have organic minerals, organic vitamins. You have everything that your body wants to push out everything from the healing process that took place in the night. That's why I always recommend the first meal of the day is fruit.
Spring water should be consumed only 10, 15, 20% of the time, and distilled water the rest of the time. So my rule is 80 to 90% of your consumption should be distilled water, 10%, 20% is spring water.
What is an inorganic mineral? And why does the body only use organic minerals? And why can you only get organic minerals through fruits and vegetables that are usable to the body? So, does distilled water leach minerals? According to Dr. Group's Global Healing Institute, one of the biggest misconceptions is that distilled water leaches minerals from the body. The truth is, distilled water only removes inorganic, non-bioavailable minerals, which would otherwise contribute to calcification. Here's an explanation from Dr. Berg with some great visuals. Take a look.
So I wanted to clear up a confusion that I've noticed that quite a few people have related to the definition of organic. When people think of organic, they think about food that is grown without pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, antibiotics, right? Well, there's another definition of organic as it relates to minerals, okay? So you have organic minerals and inorganic minerals. So organic minerals would be plant-based minerals. Now, when we get to inorganic minerals, we're talking about the rocks and minerals in the soil. Only plants can convert those rocks or inorganic minerals or elemental minerals to the organic form. Our bodies were meant to consume organic minerals. They're more bioavailable, and it's much more difficult to absorb inorganic minerals. Our bodies were not meant to just take a spoonful of soil and then down it. We need to consume the plants or the animals. Animals also have the organic form of minerals. So sometimes you'll get people that will say, well, the chemistry is very, very similar, so our bodies will absorb it. Yes, it is similar, but it's not the same. Now, if you're going to consume the iron shavings off of a nail versus consuming some of the iron in the hemoglobin in red meat, there is a huge difference. There's a big difference between consuming rocks or calcium carbonate, which is limestone, versus the calcium in cheese, for example, or the magnesium in chlorophyll, which is very similar to the chemistry of blood. This is organic, this is inorganic. And what's shocking is the majority of, and even the minerals in a multivitamin mineral product that you would get at either the GNC or the drugstore are inorganic. Okay, that's why they're so heavy. They can be used as a paperweight. And it's filled with calcium carbonate and all sorts of inorganic minerals that are not the best bioavailable minerals that you can get. So when you're actually getting minerals, get them from actual food, or if you're going to get them as a supplement, make sure that they are organic minerals. Today, I'm going to talk about the positive things about distilled water. There's a lot of people that are getting amazing results from using distilled water. So I want to share a little bit more on what it is and how you can use it and what it could be good for. Distilled water is basically pure H2O without any of the impurities, without any viruses, bacteria, because those get killed in the heating process. Also, all the minerals are taken out, all the heavy metals are taken out, all the pharmaceutical drugs, medications that are estrogenic are removed, and also the toxic chemical gases are removed as well. They're called volatile organic compounds. So you get rid of that and you just have pure water. And it's called hungry water because it's like a very potent solvent, which I'm going to explain. So you're basically boiling the water, turning it to steam, and then funneling it into some container. Like rain and snow are like nature's distilled water, where it becomes evaporated, goes into the clouds, and it comes down. Of course, nowadays, because of all the pollution in the air and the like plastics in the air, you don't want to be drinking rainwater or snow. But long ago, it probably was something really good to drink. So distilled water has a pH of 7. It's completely neutral. And it has some really interesting benefits. And of course, the version of distilled water that I'm going to recommend is not going to be the one that you would buy at the grocery store in a plastic jug that's been sitting there for a long time, leaching out all the plastics into this distilled water. I'm going to recommend probably making your own, getting a unit that has stainless steel that then filters it to a glass container. That would be the ideal situation. So there's some really interesting benefits. Number one, it can help remove certain toxins like heavy metals, like mercury, cadmium, lead. And nowadays we are swimming in a sea of chemicals hitting us from every different angle. And it's hard to know the influence of these chemicals on our bodies. So drinking distilled water gives you a chance to see what you would really feel like without these heavy metals and other toxins that are in your body. All right, number two, it can help remove deposits of certain minerals that you don't want in your joints, okay? Let's say you have arthritis or stiffness. Well, distilled water can help break down some of that deposit and remove it from the body. So a lot of people feel just less stiff. They feel more flexible when they drink distilled water. Also, removing calcium from your arteries. There are several things you can do to remove calcium from the arteries, like vitamin K2, a good chelator like EDTA, but also you can use distilled water as a chelator to pull out this excess calcium from your arteries. Now, as we age, calcium builds up also in other tissues like our eyes, like as cataracts. So that's another benefit. Okay, number three, if you're prone to kidney stones or even gallstones, there is a buildup of calcium. And so distilled water would be a really important thing to take if you want to reduce your risk of getting stones in the body. Now, the question that you're probably going to have is, well, I've heard rumors that if you drink distilled water, it's going to deplete me of all my minerals and it's going to throw off my electrolytes and probably cause my red blood cells to explode and I might die, right? Well, that's not going to happen because all you need to do is put the minerals that you want or you need back into your body. Just start taking electrolytes with the distilled water. So that way you can have more of certain minerals and not too much of other minerals. We don't want a lot of extra calcium in our joints, in our eyes, and in our arteries. So all these minerals or metals that have a hard time getting out of the body can be excreted a bit more with distilled water. Now, one thing you might find when you start drinking distilled water is it can increase diuresis. So you're going to urinate a bit more. But just drink more water so you can start flushing out things and start cleaning out your body. So just make sure you put the minerals back into your body as well as eating foods that are high in minerals. Now, another point I want to bring up is, should you be drinking distilled water when you're fasting? And I think it's actually a really, really good idea because even though it will deplete your electrolytes, you can easily put those back in. But think about what's happening when you're fasting. You are going through autophagy. You are cleaning up old dead cells. You're cleansing and you're detoxifying, and your body is generating a lot of antioxidants when you're fasting. So a lot of good things are happening. And if you add the distilled water to this, you can at the same time assist in removing a lot of these toxins that are coming out from the body. But again, just make sure you put those minerals back in. Now, there's a lot of people that actually drink their tap water, okay, their city water, and others will get a filter, and that's all great. But what you have to realize is that, yes, it's true that there might be low bacterial counts in the tap water, the city water that you drink, but that's because they're adding a lot of additional chemicals to sterilize or kill these microbes. So even though it might be free of microbes, it might be very high in these chemicals that are going to affect you. And these chemicals are estrogenic. They have effects on your skin, your brain, in fact, the entire body. I mean, there's some pretty disgusting things in tap water that they found, like toilet paper particles, tampon particles. I mean, it's pretty disgusting. So at the very least, get a filter, and you may even want to consider getting a good steam distiller.
The U.S. Navy and U.S. embassies have been using distillers and recommending distilled water for decades. Not only is it safe to drink, but it's healthy too. Another myth about distilled water is that it removes needed minerals from water. Most minerals in water are inorganic and in a form that your body can't absorb. In fact, inorganic minerals can build up inside the body and create stiffening of the joints, kidney and gallstones, calcium deposits, and arthritis. Furthermore, you would have to drink hundreds of gallons of water a day to get any of the necessary minerals from water. We actually get our minerals from the food we eat or by taking supplements. Some people think that distilled water is too acidic to drink. However, the pH of distilled water is near that of tap or bottled water, which is around 7.0 on the pH scale, which is neutral. As distilled water is exposed to the air, it will absorb some carbon dioxide, which might have a slight effect on the pH, but no effect in your body. One of the main functions of your kidneys is to maintain proper pH throughout your entire body. Did you know that the pH can vary from organ to organ or even cell to cell inside your body?
Another big myth is that you need alkaline water to drink. Again, even if you bought water with a pH of 9, which is very, very alkaline, when you take a swallow of that water, by the time it goes through your mouth, your esophagus, and down into your acidic, very, very acidic stomach, all of the alkalinity has been canceled. Your body, the small intestine, cannot tell whether you just drank a water with a pH of 6, 7, 9. It has no idea because the stomach acid is orders of magnitude more acidic than any water that you could possibly ever drink. And so if someone says, oh, but the pH of reverse osmosis water is 6, it's very acidic. Well, remind them that the acidity of the coffee they're drinking, the pH of coffee is about 4, and tea also is about 4. So if they're worried about acidity, they probably ought to stop the coffee and tea as well because they have an acidity of about 4, which also does not matter because your stomach acid is about 100 times more acidic than that. So it makes no difference whatsoever. Now, be very shocked at how few minerals are actually even water labeled mineral water. So I think that we definitely need our minerals, but I think you need to get your minerals and your electrolytes from the foods you eat or by adding an electrolyte supplement, which we often do.
Today, I'm going to talk about the benefits, the side effects, and the dangers of alkaline water. Now, naturally, when you're drinking water from a spring or from a well or an artesian well, it's going to be alkaline. And it's alkaline because of the minerals, calcium, magnesium, which are both alkaline. But definitely people have this idea that anything acid is unhealthy or will cause sickness, and anything alkaline is healthy, which is absolutely not true because in our bodies, we have a lot of different acids. Nucleic acids, as in your DNA. You have hydrochloric acid as your stomach acid. You even have lactic acid that's in your colon to help you digest. You have amino acids and fatty acids. So just because something is acid doesn't make it bad. Okay, we have this scale of acidity and alkalinity, and right in the center is 7, which is neutral, and distilled water is neutral. And as the numbers go up, okay, above 7, okay, so you have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up to 14, things are becoming more alkaline. And just so you know, at the very top of the list, like 14, which is extremely alkaline, you have things like drain cleaner, bleach, which is, I think, 13, and soap, which is, it could be anywhere between 8 and 10. So those are all alkaline. Then as we go lower, we get things like lemon juice and apple cider vinegar and tomatoes, and of course, soda. Those are all acidic. But when we talk about pH in our body, most of the time we're referencing our blood pH, which normally should be slightly alkaline. So if neutral was 7, your blood is 7.34. to 7.45. And I think the biggest myth about pH is that it's very difficult to change your pH by taking something. And I'm talking about changing the pH of your blood. So whether someone's eating more alkaline food or more acidic food, that pH in your blood is probably unlikely to change. Our body tends to control and regulate the pHs of the different parts of our body. So, for example, your saliva should be slightly alkaline. Your blood should be slightly alkaline. Your stomach should be very, very, very acidic. But your small intestine that goes right after the stomach should be alkaline. Yet the large bowel should be acidic, not like the stomach, but slightly acidic. Of course, we have the gallbladder and bile, which should be alkaline. So we don't want to alkalize the body. Okay, that's not a smart thing to do. And primarily the reason for that is because when you take something that's alkaline, and specifically I'm talking about alkaline water, you are going to alter the stomach's pH, which should be between 1 and 3, very acidic. And doing that is going to come with a package. Like you may end up with heartburn, acid reflux, gas, GERD. You might have an increased risk of infection. You might have hair loss. You might have arrhythmias. And I'm not talking about alkaline water from the spring or artesian well or some type of water that you would get naturally with the minerals. And I'm mainly talking about a water that's created maybe from a machine or something that has nothing to do with minerals. So there's a machine out there that you can get that alkalizes the water, and they don't add minerals to it. They put electricity through the water and they alter the water and take out the acidic part, leaving this water very alkaline. I remember in practice once testing someone's urine after they used this machine for about 2 weeks, and the pH of their urine, which normally should be acidic, was like 9, which is extremely alkaline for your urine. And so this will really put them in a situation where they're very susceptible to having infections. They can't kill off microbes that well. So there is some huge side effects from drinking a lot of extremely alkaline water. But there's not going to be any side effects from drinking your spring water that's alkaline or some bottled spring water that has a lot of minerals in it because it's made alkaline in a natural way. So here's some missing information that you need to know. The pH in your stomach should be between 1 and 3, very, very acidic. And the purpose of that acidity is to help you break down protein, is to help you absorb minerals, also absorb B12, as well as to kill off pathogens, right? I'm talking about bacteria, fungus, parasites that could be in your food. Okay, it's kind of a natural barrier, your immune barrier. And so as we age, we lose this stomach acid. People that are taking antacids are putting their pH in their stomach in the wrong direction because the actual cause of heartburn, GERD, and acid reflux, most of the time, is this. Your stomach acids are not strong enough, and that valve at the top of the stomach is not closing, so you're regurgitating acids. The thing to do to correct this is to take more acids, not to take less acids or not to alkalize the stomach with anything that just makes it worse. So if we alkalize the stomach, we start developing a condition called hypochlorhydria, or like no acid in your stomach, which is called achlorhydria. And in that situation, not only are you not going to be able to digest protein, so these undigested protein particles get into the small intestine, into the large intestine, and it starts to affect the immune system in a negative way. You may start developing allergies. There was an interesting study done on mice where they got rid of the stomach acid, fed them fish, and they developed allergies to fish protein, which is interesting. So not being able to digest protein can increase risk of getting allergies, can create gas, and all sorts of things like constipation. The other important thing about stomach acids is to be able to absorb iron, calcium, magnesium, zinc, potassium. Without having stomach acid, you could easily be deficient in these minerals, not to mention the vitamin B12. So all this can create anemia, and it can lead to many other issues. And of course, this acid kills off microbes. So if you can't kill off microbes, you end up with microbes in your small intestine, okay? And that term is called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. which is a pretty nasty condition. So that means every time you eat, you're going to feel bloated, and it usually is created because your stomach acid is not strong. The side effects from people taking antacids are the same as those who have not enough stomach acid. So those are some of the side effects of alkaline water. Now, should we drink acidic water? Well, personally, I found that when I drink carbonated water and it's slightly acidic, and I actually can digest better, especially if I add a little teaspoon of either apple cider vinegar or maybe some lemon juice. Now, since we're on the topic of pH, I want to just talk about one more thing. If you actually develop a condition called alkalosis, which your pH is definitely way too alkaline. So here are the side effects from having alkalosis. Number one, you are going to have low potassium. You're going to have low calcium. That calcium is going to bind to protein. Now, this calcium is unavailable for the muscle contraction relaxation effect. And you're going to start having these weird twitches. It's called tetany. Sometimes it's underneath the eye. Sometimes it's in the arm. It could be anywhere in the body. It can also affect the heart rhythm. You can start developing heart arrhythmias. The muscle is greatly affected in an alkalosis state. So either the muscle is going to be in spasm, it's going to be crampy, it's going to be in pain, it's going to be weak. But overall, you're going to have some really abnormal sensations in the body, both nerve-wise and muscle-wise. And it can even get so severe that you can go into either a seizure or a coma. We don't want alkalosis, and we don't want to be too acidic. We want to have the right pH for the right part of your body. Having the right pH, especially in our stomachs, will allow certain enzymes to work. The enzyme that helps you digest protein is not activated unless you have the strong acid. And the same thing with the small intestine. Certain enzymes, like for example, for carbohydrates, are activated when it's alkaline. But like I said before, different parts of your body require different pHs. You know, where I live right now, I actually have spring water, okay? And it comes from a spring. And we recently drilled for water at a different location, okay? And they had to go, I think, 130 feet below rock. They had to drill through rock, like granite, to find this water. And so I asked the guy, I said, like, where does that water come from? And he said, well, we don't really know. Some people say it comes from the rain and snow that melts through and it seeps through the soil and it gets into the earth and it kind of forms these little pools and pockets. But my thought is, how does it get through these rock formations? And so what I learned about that, it's still a theory on where this water comes from. So it got me curious. So I did another deep dive into where our water really comes from, and I found some really interesting information. They actually found the chemistry of water, which is not in the water form. It was basically hydrogen and oxygen embedded into a mineral. And apparently this came from a volcano. So it was very, very deep. They actually calculated it to be about 400 miles deep into the earth. And apparently, which is even more interesting, there's enough water down there, or at least pre-water that can turn into water, to literally fill up an ocean. So the advantage of these minerals in water, okay, give us some additional health benefits, but only if they're created in a natural way, not from a machine that alkalizes the water, which omits that help from the minerals. Now, since we're on the topic of water, if you have not seen my video on carbonation in water, very curious about why I feel so much better when I drink carbonated water versus regular water. And I didn't know the answer until very recently. So I'm going to share this with you, as well as some other fascinating things related to CO2, carbon dioxide. So whether you're drinking soda water, club water, seltzer water, LaCroix, or any type of carbonated water, this relates to CO2, because the way they carbonate it is by adding this gas, CO2, into the water, which does make it slightly acidic because it turns into carbonic acid, unless it's stored a little bit differently as these bicarbonates in water. But regardless of that, when I drink carbonated water, I just feel more hydrated, my digestion's better, and I feel better. I feel more relaxed when I drink carbonated water. So if you happen to see some other videos related to carbon dioxide, I mentioned this one effect called the Bohr effect, BOHR. That is a condition that relates to CO2. In other words, for oxygen to be absorbed into your cells, into the tissues, it takes CO2, which is very counterintuitive. You would think, logically, if you got more air, okay, less CO2, you would have more oxygen, but that's not true. It takes that CO2 to slightly adjust the pH and drop it a little bit and make it slightly more acidic to allow the oxygen to be released. This is why if you hyperventilate in a panic attack, you're getting too much O2 and not enough CO2, and you can't breathe, right? And then you start breathing in a paper bag and you get more CO2 and now you can breathe. In fact, you can actually create a hypoxic state. That is a state of lowered oxygen by depriving the tissues of CO2, which is very interesting. Because normally you would think hypoxia, low oxygen, means too much CO2, which can occur, but you can also create that same situation with not enough CO2. So CO2 is really essential in the homeostasis of oxygen absorption. Now, in Europe, they actually have these sauna baths that are carbonated. They call them carbonated spas or baths, where they pump the CO2 into this water. And apparently it's great for all sorts of circulatory problems, like problems with your vascular system, especially something called peripheral vascular disorders. They even use it for diabetic wounds and to decrease the rate of getting an amputation where they cut off the feet. I mean, it can actually improve that by increasing microvascular circulation. So basically, CO2 increases blood flow. It's even used as the therapy after someone gets a stroke and they have this hypoxic, low oxygen state, because the CO2 helps that oxygen go deep into the cells. Now, I could not find any research on drinking carbonated water, okay, and that relating to an improved health. But I have found parallel research on all the things I'm talking about, and I'll include that down below. In one study, I found there was a significant increase in the parasympathetic nervous system activation by increasing CO2. That's the system that counters the flight or fight mode. It's the system that helps your healing and your digestion and your ability to sleep. And the device they use to measure the parasympathetic is what I used in my practice, which is technology called heart rate variability. Let's take a look at some other things that I found related to this. If you take a normal cell inside, and then you take a cancer cell, and we look at the pH of each one, the cancer cell actually is more alkaline. Now, the outside of the cell more acidic because of all the byproducts from lactic acid, things like that. But the inside of the cell is more alkaline than a normal cell, which is very interesting, especially as it relates to CO2. And I couldn't find any information on this, but think about this. When you deprive a tissue of CO2, you actually can develop alkalosis. That is a state of being too alkaline. So without that CO2 turning into carbonic acid, you can develop an overly alkaline state. And then I wanted to figure out, is there any relationship or any significant improvement in shrinking tumors or stopping the spread of cancer by increasing CO2? And I found a bunch of research, which is also very interesting, which I'll include down below. So apparently CO2 is a significant, potent anti-tumor gas. It has the ability to inhibit metastasis, which is interesting, as well as inducing apoptosis, which causes the cancer cells to commit suicide. It also inhibits this very interesting gene that's involved in this switching mechanism between a normal cell and it turning into cancer. That gene is called HIF-alpha, which is involved in hypoxia. Now, this probably doesn't make sense unless you understand that CO2 allows oxygen to go into the tissues. And as bad as hypoxia is, it can be created by a lowered amount of CO2, as well as lowered oxygen levels. But also there's this CO2 connection that is very interesting. I had this thing in my mind where if we just flood the body with oxygen, right, we'll be able to kill the cancer and we can prevent cancer. But apparently the CO2 is another key factor that we cannot ignore. Like even in a thunderstorm, you can probably breathe better. And if you ever wanted to know why, well, apparently there's a lot more CO2 in the air after a thunderstorm than there is when there's not a thunderstorm going on. Also, you'll actually get more oxygen into your tissues if you breathe through your nose, not your mouth, when you're sleeping as well as when you exercise. There's another interesting natural bath, like the springs, if you go to the hot springs. And at first we might think there's a lot of minerals involved that are helping us. But guess what? There's a significant amount of CO2 in hot springs, which could be the reason why you feel better and you're relaxed. Now, they're even using CO2 in various creams for hydration to your skin and better circulation and blood flow, which is another interesting piece of this puzzle. And the last point about the CO2 is that CO2 apparently is a potent anti-inflammatory. So I just wanted to increase your awareness on the CO2, this carbon dioxide thing, as well as carbonated water. And this could be the reason, which I think it is, of why you may feel better if you consume more carbonated water. And what I have is I have a little carbonated machine that makes my water carbonated. So I take my spring water and I carbonate it, and that's what I drink.
Carbonated water from a lens you have not heard. I'm sure you haven't heard this before, because carbonated water, especially in your fasting window, I'm just going to throw it out there based off the science I'm about to show you, it might be the thing that helps you lose weight that you haven't tried yet. So stick with me as I go through this, because there's 4 things I want you to know about mineral water, and especially the carbonated kind. Here we go. Okay, first, a lot of you, if you've heard me in my Reset Academy, a lot of you heard me talk about this on my podcast. I love mineral water for the mineral content. It's called mineral water. So it has a lot of minerals. And how many times have we talked about when you fast, you're losing minerals, and our soil's already deficient in minerals. So we've got to find ways to add minerals back in. And carbonated mineral water is one of them. I have looked at all the different kinds of carbonated mineral water out there, and the best one is Gerolsteiner. No financial incentive to tell you that for that company. This is literally the one I love the most. And it, for a variety of reasons, I love the bubble size, but it has, according to the research I've done, it has the highest mineral content. So when we look at your fasting window, I want to make sure that you don't lose sight of the fact that something like carbonated mineral water in your fasting window could give you those minerals that you need, but it also, and making fasting easier, but it also can do the other things I'm about to tell you that will make fasting a lot easier. So let's bring up your minerals by doing carbonated mineral water, and Gerolsteiner is my favorite. Okay, second one, really interesting study. In preparing for this video, I went down lots of paths of trying to look at where carbonated water is of benefit for us. I just don't think we talk about this enough. So I wanted to make sure I brought you all the science I could find. And there was something really interesting that there were several studies, I'll link them in the notes, that showed that carbonated mineral water will improve digestion. So I know a lot of you are experiencing constipation. I know a lot of you have had years of birth control and antibiotics, and you're trying to get your digestive system back on track. So think about this. Have you thought about mineral water, carbonated mineral water? So here's what it does, is it stimulates the vagus nerve. Okay, well, what does the vagus nerve do? Carbonated mineral water stimulates the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is the nerve that primes your parasympathetic nervous system, and your parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest nervous system. So when you're drinking carbonated water, both in your fasting window and eating window, you are priming this rest and digest nervous system, allowing you to digest your food a little easier. So maybe even with a meal, it might be helpful to help you digest your food a more efficient rate that's appropriate to your body. So the couple of interesting studies I found on this, and one was that a lot of people have trouble swallowing. I actually didn't realize this was such a thing, and put in the comments if this is you, but a lot of people, when they are actually eating food, food's getting stuck. They're just finding that it's not helping them swallow their food. Well, what they're showing is carbonated mineral water can help you stimulate the vagus nerve so everything relaxes and you're able to swallow your food a little bit easier.
Are you warning people against using carbonated water?
I think if you're going to drink water, you should drink still water with hydrogen.
So how hydrogen gas enriched water will you consume per day?
In the mornings, I'll use it instead of caffeine. So, a single tablet will get you to between 9 and 12 parts per million hydrogen. Some people can tolerate more than others. I drink 4 or 5 of those a day. If you want to do an interesting experiment, when you wake up in the morning, take 4 or 5 of these elemental magnesium tablets, 4 or 5 of them, drop them in about a half a liter of water, about 750 mLs of water. Drink that entire 750 milliliters of water and just feel how switched on you are.
Really?
You are instantly switched on. You can feel the inflammatory cascade dropping. CO2, I think, has the opposite effect. I haven't seen any studies on carbonated beverages having an impact on inflammation, cognitive function.
Well, this episode should have left you with a lot of food for thought. So here are some questions. Were you surprised about spring water's inorganic nature and the effects it has on the body? Did the content on distilled water clear up any misconceptions? Alkaline water has become very popular. Did the content on alkaline water surprise you? And how about that carbonated water? Any thoughts about its content? The pros and the cons? I'd like to close with this verse, Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Until next time, live your best life now. Choose life and blessing today, and live free and to the fullest for His glory.